There's a genocide against Canadian people and Indigenous people in Canada. It used to be just Indigenous people, but not anymore. Now it's all the natural-born Canadians that have been here since the beginning. Their families and kinfolk are being slowly eroded by their own Canadian government. And it doesn't matter who's in power. We just have to say government. In the United States of America, if the US government tried to do anything like this, well, the US, they have that National Rifle Association. In Canada, the government's working tirelessly to take all our guns away from us. Meanwhile, police brutality is escalating. And it used to be only escalating against Indigenous people, but not anymore. We used to only see Indigenous people passing away in emergency hospitals, emergency rooms. Someone said I'm artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence wouldn't make the verbal mistake I just did. And that's how you know. We used to see on the 20th of the month, when child tax credit came in, the grocery stores would increase their prices. And they would increase their prices for about 2 or 3 days on the first and the last of the month. Because everybody knew that the Indigenous people were getting paid their welfare. And so Loblaws and Safeway and all of the others increased their prices briefly. That's well documented and certified. But now take a look around and you can see grocery prices increasing for everyone, except for the newcomers. Apparently our government is subsidizing them. It's up for debate as to how much or how meaningful the government is subsidizing them. If you look at some of my other videos, you'll notice that I talk about population growth when food is accessible and population decline when food is not accessible. Groceries have become increasingly inaccessible to everyone since 1984. And so we have been seeing the slow decline of Canadian families having less and less children. At first it was 3 children per family, and then it became 2, and now it's less than 1. The government has been talking about it since 1980. Politicians and policymakers have been talking about it. They've known about it all along. They said, what are we going to do with our population in decline? Who's going to take over when everybody retires? And when they did retire, we lost all our doctors. They just got too old. But by then we had no children in our families. And so we had no children in our universities and colleges becoming doctors and lawyers. And so you had to import them. And that created the second wave of neo-colonialism, globalization. And so everything that has happened to Indigenous people is now happening to the Canadian people who founded this country. The very Canadians who invented and created and maintained Canadian culture. These newcomers that are arriving recently, they have no skin in the game. They just arrived from anywhere in the world, and with a sense of entitlement, as if they belong here, as if this is their land. Entitlement issues. And have you seen their Diwali festivals when they leave their wrappers all over the ground? Nobody's cleaning that up. That's you Canadians that are going to have to pay for that. Not the recent arrivals who burned off all of those firecrackers. No, the government is subsidizing them. In order to inflict suffering, to support and maintain genocide against Canadian people, in just such a way so as to not instigate any sort of uprising. You just have to squeeze them gently by increasing the grocery prices, by taking away their food, by limiting their freedom of movement, by imposing electric vehicles that are far too expensive that any Canadian can ever afford, and eliminating gas and diesel vehicles. And that's a government policy that is clearly racist, because if you live in the north or in rural communities, you're not going to be using an electric vehicle. Electric vehicles are not practical in the north. And who lives up north? Cattle and hog farmers, dairy farmers, Indigenous people, miners, oil workers, So when our Prime Minister tells us we're going to be using electric vehicles in a few years and no gas vehicles, no diesel, that's an act of racism and genocide. Canadians can't afford to pay rent. They can't afford to eat. They can't afford the freedom of movement. But the newcomers can because they're being subsidized. And they're being subsidized because they're willing to work for low wages. And so when I hear Canadians talking about, well, that's karma. This is karma. Welcome to karma. It's not karma. It's colonialism. Karma is a social construct. A social construct is an agreement between two or more people who believe in something. And that belief doesn't have to be founded in reality at all, and oftentimes it isn't. It's like believing that the number 13 is bad luck, when luck itself is a social construct. Gender identity issues are a social construct. They're not real. They're not founded in any reality. Sex and biology is real. Karma is not real. Karma is just like luck. But colonialism is real. But it is supported and maintained by many social constructs that are not founded in reality. There is a genocide against the Canadian people that have been here since the very beginning, the ones we've grown up with, the ones we've known and loved. For me, they were the kids that lived down the street, we went to school with. We hung out and we gathered. We had our groups. And when we walked past each other in the street, we waved and said hi. But we lost each other along the way. And that was no accident either. That was the government working to divide us. And they used that race. And race is a social construct. It's totally imaginary. It's made up. It's fantasy. There is no such thing as race. There is. You can believe in it if you want. But it's totally pure imaginary, fantasy. It's like believing in the number 13 being unlucky. You'd be better off believing in Santa Claus. At least we all enjoy Christmas, or some of us. What I'm trying to tell you is that what's happening to you is real. You are going hungry. You are having trouble paying your rent. You are under severe systems of oppression when you have to be careful that you don't lose your job because you're one paycheck away from poverty and homelessness. That's called oppression. When you're afraid for your children's future, that's called oppression. When you are limited in your freedom of movement, when you have media and propaganda lying to you, placating you, when you have so-called political leaders making promises, telling you investments will improve your lives, they're not going to improve your life, Canadians. They'll improve the newcomers' lives, not yours. Right now, the plan is to usher you out in the same way they tried to usher Indigenous people out. We read about this in something called Indigenous Studies or Native Studies in university. It was called the Vanishing Indian, and now it's happening to Canadians. It's called the Vanishing Canadian. They were painting portraits of Indigenous people. They were taking photos when the camera was invented. They wrote stories about us. They wanted to capture Indigenous people in their moment before they vanished forever. Have you noticed we don't watch movies about you anymore? We have diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of those movies now. So you're being vanished. And you really need to take that seriously. And the interesting thing is not a shot fired. The reason this is happening is because there are 2 billion of those people from India and Pakistan. When globalization and neocolonialism really started was when corporations saw that China had 1 billion people, cheap labor. And so they entered China, and the corporations accessed this cheap labor. But the world learned its lesson about that. And so India is offering something different. They have 2 billion people that can colonize the world. Every nation in the world can be colonized by 10 million India people. That's neocolonialism. Canadians still outnumber the neocolonial mandate. Maybe not in Vancouver, and maybe not in Brampton, Ontario. But overall, Canadians do outnumber. Think about that. Think about what your future is going to look like for your children. You're afraid, but you're not alone. There's a genocide against Canadian